So today we are here with Adam Hollier, and he is a candidate for City Council for District 5. So, Mr. Hollier, is it okay if I call you that?
Please do.
I was impressed with your presentation as you were canvassing the neighborhood, and you shared a little bit about yourself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point in your career?
Cool. Well, my name is Adam Hollier. I was born and raised in District 5. I was born at Hutzel Hospital. I grew up in the North End, and my wife and I own a home in the North End, and I speak about that for the very reason that too many people can't say that. They can't say that the neighborhood that they were raised in was good enough for them to raise a family in, or is even still there. I mean, the block that my mom grew up on, there's only one house left on, and not hers. And that's the difference on whether or not we're going to say our city and our neighborhoods are going to be of value, are going to be places that are going to work and are going to do that. And for 3 years, I worked to do that. You know, as the chief of staff to Senator Burt Johnson, we got regional mass transit done. We dealt with home foreclosures with the Save the Dream mortgage foreclosure package and countless other things that make a difference here. And that's what we've got to continue to do. We've got to say our neighborhoods are number one priority.
Very good, and that's something I can relate to because I too bought a home on the street in the same neighborhood that I grew up on. So that's something I can definitely relate to. Now, for some young people who may not understand what the City Council does and why they should vote in this election, what would you share with them?
I would say that for far too long, people have not been involved because they didn't feel like they saw the immediacy of results. And so City Council and other elected officials respond to people who vote for them. And as a young person myself, I think our concerns are really not handled in the city of Detroit. So when you look at who lives in the city and why they live here, you see very few young families. And in a lot of ways, that's because young families don't vote the way seniors do. So we make a priority for seniors and senior issues, but not for individuals in their 20s and 30s who we've kind of passed on. We said, hey, the city of Detroit's not going to be effective at recruiting you. Why are we going to even try? And that's been a big difference. You know, City Council have some responsibilities at the table, but they're bigger issues, and I think what they should be doing is being ambassadors for both neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. And that's probably the last thing that they've been doing over the last couple of years.
Okay, very good. Now, very few candidates get elected to an office on their first attempt. How are you running your campaign differently? In what ways is your campaign going to distinguish you from other candidates?
Well, one of the things is I knock more doors than anybody else. So I go out and I talk to people. And I talk to people, and that's how we met. You know, is that I believe that for you to vote for somebody, you should know them. You shouldn't be voting for them because of their name or because they did X, Y, Z. That is completely unrelated to being good at this job. And being able to do that makes a big difference. Convincing neighbors and friends and individuals who say, hey, I believe in what he's talking about, who he is and what type of difference he's going to make. And bringing those individuals into the campaign and having them help and do other things. So it's really a movement, and it's more than just saying, this is about me, but these are the issues that we need to address, and I'm willing to step up to do that, but it takes a team to do it.
Okay. Now, quite honestly, a lot of people in the city of Detroit have grown despondent because of scandals and other allegations and things that have been going on. What ways can you encourage them or reassure them that you won't be swayed by any impropriety?
Well, you know, I think that a lot of people like to say that power corrupts. Absolutely. I don't believe that for a second. You know, it just gives you a chance to be who you are. So when you're in charge, you do what you want to do. When you're working for someone, you do what you have to do. And the difference is finding people that we know and trust and actually knowing them. So if you know someone, you know what they're going to do, you know how they've acted throughout the totality of their situation, when they had a little bit of authority and when they did or did not respond. And I think that's why I talk about where I'm from. Because if you go and you say, hey, what do you think about Adam? I know he said he grew up in your neighborhood. People will tell you I've been the same person I have been. Whether I was more powerful or less powerful, it makes a big difference when you say, who is he, what grounds him, where does he go to school, where did he go to church, where does he do all those types of things, what does his family look like? You know, my wife and I bought an old home and we've been fixing it up. I think that says a lot about my character, my commitment to the neighborhood.
Okay. The next question is kind of two parts. So tell us about any prior leadership positions that you've held and a difficult situation and how you handled it.
I'm glad you asked. So I used to be the chief of staff for Senator Burt Johnson, and I did that for 3 years. And one of my biggest projects was the Regional Transit Authority. And for all of you who aren't familiar, it was something that we've been trying to do for 30, 40 years, is get one system that works well and is coordinates routes throughout the state for Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County. And my boss really empowered me to take the lead on that. So we had to work with Republicans, we had to work with Democrats, we had to work with people from the city and the suburbs, on this project that people had decided was probably impossible and never going to happen. And so I had to go out and work with all the county executives and their deputies, whether it be in Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, or Washington. And so I drove out one morning to Oakland County to meet with, the deputy county exec there. And for all who know Brooks Patterson, you know that he's typically not a fan of things that are going on in the city. But we had to work with them. We had to find a way that made sense, and eventually they signed up. But for us to really get it done, I had to convince a Republican senator to sponsor the legislation. And so I went and found Senator Tom Casperson, who's the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. He's a Republican. He's from Escanaba, which is up in the UP. And we got him to come ride buses, and we started in Highland Park, and we rode all around town all day. And we were late to everything. We were cold. We missed buses. And you realize what a difference it makes once it's your reality. And even if it's just a small reality. And that's the difference in saying, hey, this is what it really means to do this work. And so I'm glad, after he left, he's like, this is something we've got to fix.
Okay. Right. I remember when I first met you, you were talking about your degrees and where you went to school.
Mm-hmm.
So give us a little bit of that educational background.
Right. Well, so I'm very much so a proud DPS graduate. I went to Flicks, Halley, Renaissance, got my bachelor's at Cornell University in Industrial Labor Relations, got my master's at the University of Michigan in Urban Planning. And so I think we spend a lot of time talking about how Detroit public schools aren't any good. And that's just not true. We have a lot of really good schools, but we also have a lot of schools with serious challenges. But for our schools to get any better, it means that people who got great educations from DPS decide to send their children to DPS schools and say, hey, we're going to make these schools better. So they're not just going to get better.
Okay. All right. What's one of the first things you plan to do if you're elected?
First thing is the perception. As you started talking about scandals, the view of Detroit has to change. It has to change if we're going to be able to convince people first to stay. Every day people say, it's just not getting any better. And we've got to convince people that Detroit is getting better, because it is. It's just not getting better everywhere. We've got to show people that it is, and for people who want to do better and want more, we've got to show them a way that it's going to work. And if we change the perception so people have a little bit of hope, a little bit of faith in some of these neighborhoods and the way the city is going, then we can really start to do work. Then people will really invest, because nobody really invests in something they don't believe in. So if people can believe in the city, who live here, then we can convince people who don't live here to believe again. And if you do that, I think we've got all the tools, I think we've got all the resources to make the city viable again, to make it the type of place that is a top 10 community to live in, that when you say to your children, where do you want to live? They say, I want to live in Detroit. I know that I can do anything here. I know I can make my dreams a reality.
Okay. Now, if elected, you'll just be one of 9 city council members.
I will be.
How can you impact the council as a whole, and what's your vision for a new city council?
I'm glad you asked. So for the last 9 months, I've been the mayor's liaison to the city council, and that's an interesting job. Not always easy, not typically easy, but it's all about math. It's counting to what some people would say is 5, what I like to say is 7. You need more than just your own voice, but you also need to be talking about these issues and uniting around a core vision, which is not something that we've done. So if the city said, as a council, as a city, we said, hey, this is where we want to go, then it's real easy to say, all right, have you invested in this vision? And if you have, when things come up that support it, you say, well, you've already said you're on board for the big picture. Let's do this smaller thing. This is how we get that work done. And that's what we haven't done. Every issue has been its own fight, its own issue. And because of that, people have so many more opportunities to say, well, I disagree on this, or I disagree with that, or you didn't convince me. No. We're buying into the big picture, and then we're doing the work to make it happen.
Okay. How will your election to the city council benefit District 5, and how do you plan to maintain communication with the residents in that district?
One, I live in District 5. I was born and raised here. My family lives here. The people I grew up with still live in District 5. I know a lot of these people, and a lot of them know me. But my house is pretty easy to find. You're always welcome to come see me, and that's how I was raised in this type of work. My boss, Senator Johnson, from before, gave out his cell phone number. So my number is on the cards. My home address is on the cards. Sure. So that you get a chance to call me, to talk to me, to say, hey, I had this issue, I had this thing. And that makes a difference. I'm going to raise my family. I'm going to go through all the same things. I go to church in this district. My doctor, is in this district. I use this district from beginning to end, whether it's going to the grocery store, whether it's going to the market. That's the difference between a district that is or isn't. But I'm a recruiter first and foremost, and I will always be saying District 5 is the best district to live in. It's the strongest part of the city. You know, it's a place that, I mean, we're sitting in District 5 right now.
Right.
You know, that's the thing. It's saying, how do we get people, you know, in critical mass to say, this is the space that we're going to make work? Okay. And I think that's this one.
What do you hope to have accomplished at the end of your four-year term?
Is that people feel very fundamentally different about the city. And so when people say, Detroit, it's not at the end of a punchline. It's at the beginning of, I'm moving to Detroit, or I stayed here because. And to do that, we've got to make, you know, we've got to make the city safer. We've got to make people feel like they can go out and walk down the streets, like their kids can play in the streets. They've got to feel like they can get a great education for their children. And they've got to feel like we have the infrastructure necessary for their dreams to come true, whether that be regional mass transit, whether it be light rail, whether it be increased bike lanes or access to water or parks or green infrastructure. We've got to do a couple things that seem like these huge, hulking issues, but aren't so bad if we really, you know, roll up our sleeves and go to work and do them.
Okay, very good. Now, up until this point, you and I have been having a really good conversation about this, but what I want you to do is look right at the camera and talk to the residents who may be watching this, talk to the people in the city of Detroit, and give them any final words that you want to share.
Well, like I said, my name is Adam Hollier, and I was born here. I was raised here, and I plan on raising my family here. And that's what we need people in the city to say. And it's not. And for us to do that, we've got to say that our neighborhoods are our priority and to work on them, to really do the work ourselves, not to ask on government or business community or nonprofits to do it just by themselves, but for us to come together and say, this is where we want to go as a city. This is our vision, and this is how we're going to get it done. And I'm very happy, I'm very excited about being able to work with you to make sure that our vision is something that becomes a reality. Once again, my name is Adam Hollier. I'm running for City Council in District 5. Have a great day.
This is Dr. DeAndrea Wiggins. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch soon.